Hey everybody, Jim Neeb here. Hey, I'm going to do a quick video today on a raised letter sign that I just finished. Normally I make these with the spindle on my CNC, and this was extremely fine cursive lettering that was pretty tricky to align and glue down. And now that I have the XT8 laser, I can easily cut 1/4 inch MDF with. It makes this possible. But even with that, making this was kind of tricky. I had to try a couple different things to figure out how to align it and glue down the parts. So I'm going to show you how I will kind of progress from the things that didn't work to the final thing that did work on this. So this is the sign. It's actually a seating chart for a wedding for a friend of ours. It's 66 inches tall and 36 inches wide, and it fits down into a slot in a box, in kind of a box that's a stand. So obviously has the date on the bottom, has a bunch of these pegs that I just bought off of Amazon. They're little 1-inch long wooden pegs that I stained and glued in. They're going to hold the attendee's name and tell them where to sit. So there's a bunch of pegs in there, and then the names up at the top. And so you can see these are 1/4 inch MDF that I painted, and they're glued down. And there's a couple of tricky things. One is all of these letters are separate on the regular text, so they need to be aligned and spaced properly, so they look good. And then the cursive stuff here is super thin. Some of these areas are only 30 thousandths wide, so they're very fragile. They wanted to break pretty easily. So the only way to cut these out is with the laser. Something like this you can get away with cutting with a spindle, maybe an 1/8 inch end mill if you take your time, but they tend to pop out then and damage themselves. Whereas with the laser, you can cut anything out. It'll stay put and get a nice clean edge. With the laser, you do get a charred edge, so you do have to do a little more paint preparation to get that all to come out, with a nice overcoat of the color you want. So anyway, that's what it looks like. Let's get into building it. All right, here we're just doing the cutout of some of the letters. It's 1/4 inch MDF. The XT8 laser cuts this stuff really great. That's why I like it so much, because I use a lot of 1/4 inch MDF for raised letter type signs, because it's a little more prominent than 1/8 inch, and it just really cuts it nice. It's a perfect thickness for it. So now I've cut the letters, or the date part of the sign out, and you can see I already lost the comma. It fell down through my honeycomb table. So these pieces are pretty small, and I don't want them just flying around. I gotta paint them and stuff like that. So one trick I found that works is to get a piece of tape, if I can actually get it off the roll, and just tape it across the letters and the backing piece, so that when I lift it up, most of them stay in. Lost the two. So these are pretty fragile, but they should hold together. So I'm going to paint those white, and then I'm going to use the back that I cut them out of. I'm going to use that as the template to replace them, because I have to glue them on straight on the sign. So this piece is going to act as my guide for that. And now I have to dig my comma out of there. Now these letters are very light, so if I tried spray painting them just sitting there, it would just blow them off of the cardboard. So I've taped them down, or stuck them down on the back side of this tape now, and then taped the tape down upside down. So they're basically sitting on this tape, so I can spray. I'm going to prime them first and then spray paint them white. So here I'm just using a slab milling bit to plane off about half of the thickness of the bottom portion of the sign. It needs to fit in a stand that has a slot in it, basically. So I got to cut the 3/4 inches down to about 5/16 inches thick. So the CNC with I'm using a 2.5 inch slab slayer bit. This works really well for milling down plywood like that. Cuts it very cleanly and quickly. All right, now we're gonna drill out all the holes for the pegs. What I did was I measured the diameter of the peg and drilled the holes just a few thousandths of an inch on the small side from the average. These pegs varied by about 6 thousandths of an inch in diameter at least across the 5 or 6 that I measured. And so I made the holes just slightly on the small side because I'm going to glue them and tap them in with a dead blow, and I want them to fit kind of snugly. You'll notice in the gluing process that I had to throw a few away because they were just too loose, and I made plenty extras, so it didn't really matter. But you can always pound them in if they're a little tight, but it's not good when they're too sloppy. So it's always good to measure a bunch of them and kind of get a good feel for what the average hole diameter needs to be so that most of them fit snugly. All right, this left very nice clean drill holes. So this is birch plywood from Lowe's. I think I bought it from. Even though it's $90+ a sheet, it's really cheap crap these days. The veneer is super thin, probably 50 thousandths or less thick, and the glue is pretty sketchy now too. So there'll be spots where the veneer just isn't glued on very good, so it wants to chip up really easily. So with this kind of stuff, you really have to use a down cut on the surface. So in this case, I'm not drilling all the way through, so I don't have to worry about tear out on the bottom. So I'm just using a straight, or not straight, but regular down cut. So it's not a compression bit, because I use a tool path where it's a pocketing tool path because the hole was a little bit smaller than the diameter of my 1/8 inch bit. So I could just do a regular pocketing tool path, and then I put a ramp feed that was about a 1/2 inch long. These holes are only 0.225 inches. So basically that ramp feed takes it all the way to the bottom, so I get a nice spiral drill out of that instead of having it. And then I set my pass depth on that bit bigger than the depth of that I'm cutting, so it basically does a spiral ramp all the way to the bottom of the hole. So that gives me a nice smooth fast cut. It doesn't do multiple steps down, and I get with the down cut I get a really nice clean cut on top. There's no chipping at all on this. The other thing is, you see I have my air nozzle blowing on there. So when you're doing down cut, this one wasn't too bad because the diameter of this hole is almost twice as big as the bit, so it can get chips out pretty readily. But if the hole you're drilling is pretty close to the diameter of the bit, it's really hard for a down cut to clear it. So I always try to use a bit that's like half the diameter, or slightly more than half the diameter of the bit, with a pocketing tool path. That works really good. But sometimes you don't have a choice and the hole gets pretty close to the diameter of the bit. Then make sure you get your air nozzle on there and blow on it pretty hard. That'll help blow those chips out of there and help keep it from packing stuff in and getting hot. And then when you're doing like peck drilling, where you're just going straight down and no circular motion, you pretty much don't want to use a down cut bit for that. It can't clear. It has nowhere to put the chips but to pack them on the bottom. So in that case, you almost have to use compression, or sometimes straight bits work good. But one with instead of a flat bottom, in that case, sometimes you can get them with a little bit of a tip, a little bit like a Forstner bit or Brad Point bit or something. That style, they'll cut pretty clean even though they're upcut. So anyway, that's how I get clean cuts on this stuff. And boy, drilling this with a CNC sure saves time over doing this by hand.
That's 602, the number 2, then ordering zones.
Meet Cheryl. Hey, she's on vacation and lost in the moment. Unfortunately, so is her Chase debit card.
These skirts should have pockets.
Okay, so originally I said keep the template or keep the cutouts from the letters here, keep the back part or the leftover piece for a template to actually put the letters in and align them to the whole piece. Unfortunately, I can't use that because to get the letters to cover with the white color that the customer wanted, I needed to seal it with some polyurethane. Then I put a few coats of spray paint primer on, and then a few coats of white, and that added enough thickness to the letters that they didn't really fit in these very tightly. And the other problem is they're obviously the same thickness, so they're kind of flush and it's hard to push down on them to get the glue to stick. So what I did instead was I cut a new template out of just plain corrugated cardboard, and I made them 5/1000ths of an inch wider. I should have made them about 10/1000ths of an inch. They tend to kind of hang on to the cardboard a little bit. But anyway, this is a little bit nicer because I could make it a little fatter so they fit better. And then this is thinner so that the letters actually stick out proud. So when I glue them in, I'll be able to hold them down and push on the, or even just put a weight on top without the cardboard holding it up. Okay, I used the cardboard template for the bottom rows of letters. This didn't work very well still. I only made the outline 5/1000ths bigger. That wasn't enough, and it was still too deep, and it was basically these letters were getting glued down to the wood, but they were also getting glued to the cardboard enough that it was very hard to get the cardboard out of there. So now I've changed the plan to using paper for the last set of letters. So here you can see I've got just a thin piece of paper, and I also made the outline a total of 15/1000ths wider than the actual letters that I cut out. So um, I'm gonna be able to get these in here without gluing down to the paper, and then because the paper is a lot thinner and lighter, I'll be able to pull this off a lot easier. So I've sanded the wood finish. This has a stain and 2 coats of polyurethane on it. I've done a light sanding with 600 grit because I wanted to give the glue a little bit better chance to glue down. And it's also my final coat, and I always sanded between coats. So basically I've wiped on the stain before I put the knobs on and anything. Then I wiped on 2 coats of wipe-on polyurethane. So that was my second coat essentially with the polyurethane. And generally I spray with the last one. So I sanded these areas where I'm gluing these down, and then I'm going to do one final spray coat over everything. That way it's easy to, these pegs make it really hard to do a wipe on finish that looks good, but I can spray that lightly pretty easily. So one other thing to note is that I glued these. When I spray painted these, what worked really well is I used a piece of tape upside down to hold these letters down. Like this E was here. That works great to hold them in place. Otherwise the spray paint will just blow these all over the place. But when you're all done, there's some little like burrs of paint along this very bottom edge where it tends to build up. So I just use the edge of this knife to kind of scrape those off a little bit wherever they're sticking out, just to make it look a little crisper, and that kind of makes it look good. So now all I have to do is basically I put a little bit of CA glue on the back of these, put a shot or two of accelerator down, and then I'll just place these one at a time and in place, and kind of just centered inside this area. And I think hopefully this is kind of the magic combination of alignment process, so I don't have to do so much cleanup work afterwards like I did on the bottom letters. So I'm just going through the process one at a time here. Little glue, little accelerator, and hold it down for 30 seconds or so till it gets hard, and then move on. And I just kind of align the pieces inside the gap of the paper so that there's the same even space around it, and that turned out to work pretty well. All right, and this is the finished product. Pretty happy with it. It was more of a pain in the butt than I thought, just trying to get the letters cut out without breaking. Definitely the only way I could have cut the pieces out was with the laser. They were just so fine and everything. But it turned out pretty nice, and they glued on pretty well once I figured out a good way to align it with the paper template that I also cut out with the laser. So if you have any questions or comments, please leave them down in the comment section, and I'll answer them. Thank you.